Here we are. Welcome to What the Bleep Are We Talking About with Ryan and Ian.
Or Ian and Ryan. We still haven't decided which way.
Ian and Ryan. I like that one.
I'd like to just identify that this is our first attempt. This will be our very first podcast, November 9th, 2024.
Mm-hmm. Shortly after the big election.
Yeah.
It just started snowing pretty good for the first time this year. I think there's a lot of change going on.
Right. And for those of you that don't know us, we're actually in Longmont, Colorado, where we're recording. And brave new world, hopefully.
Thank you, Longmont Public Media, for hosting us.
Yes, definitely.
Great joint.
Such a supportive environment, and what an amazing opportunity to have a place like this right in our backyard.
Thank you for the refreshments in the refrigerator. Please donate $1. Keep it cool. Keep it fresh.
All right. So, podcast, what does that look like?
So what are we doing here?
Well, I think we're going to introduce ourselves, help people get a taste of who you and I are, and as well, why the hell we're sitting here doing this in the first place, and what we want to see for the future.
Yeah. One thing we're here for is to reduce suffering however we can for ourselves, for our community, for our hearts. It's really important that we, as a people, not take a victimhood stance, and that we take responsibility for our worldview and our happiness, our joy, our health.
Our experience.
Our experience here.
Totally.
It's time to wake up to the fact that we can change and become what we want to be.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is choice. You know, that I think one of the things you and I've talked about is helping people see that there's choice in how we are and the way we are, our perceptions, and the world that we're actually creating around us instead of the world that's impacting us.
We can't always control what happens in life, but believe it or not, we do have control over the meaning we assign to it and what we take from the experience.
Exactly.
And it's totally easy to say things, but in practice, it can be incredibly difficult to function and regulate, and there's so much going on.
I know from personal experience. You're speaking the truth there. Life, almost on a daily basis, is, for me personally, is always providing opportunities and challenges, and I'm sure that it's true for everyone. And it's mind-boggling how the human brain works to make it, for making it, at least me, believe that I'm the only one that's struggling, and everybody else's life is going along just dandy.
It's amazing how that's so true. For so much of my life, I felt so incredibly alone, and it made it really easy to hide. To keep what I was feeling inside because I didn't want to stick out. But in my experience, the more vulnerable I've been about what's going on in my life, the more people shared and the more I realized I'm not alone at all.
Right.
Everybody's got something going on, whether it's good or it's bad. No matter where you're at in life, people experience not getting what they want. And our level of suffering is actually up to us. As crazy as that might sound, even with our back against the wall, we can choose to smile in the face of the darkness. We can choose curiosity over anger.
Yeah.
We can
empathy, compassion.
Yeah.
Those are, I think, the two main aspects, attributes, perspectives, positions for us to hold in the most challenging of times.
We can choose acceptance over condemnation, but that starts with us. I mean, how many of you out there hate something about yourself or your life? I know I can raise my hand.
Of course.
You know?
I've got a good long list.
Yeah. I used to have a thick head of beautiful curly hair, and now I'm bald.
Yep.
It's totally obvious, too. Male pattern balding. I've got some serious widow peaks, but
Yep. Well,
I don't hate myself for it anymore. I think it's kind of nice. It's easy to take care of.
I bet. Yeah.
Ian over here has a nice head of curly hair.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I have to worry about it getting too long or washing it or all that stuff.
So who are you? How'd you get here? How did we get here?
How did we get here? Well, you want to start with that story?
Yeah.
God. My version of it is, turns out we knew somebody mutually, and I was introduced to her by her partner, who is a firefighter in the neighboring district to the department I'm a firefighter in. We'd known each other for years, and we were getting to know each other and talking a little bit and learning about me. And he was like, "You rode horses? You do coaching work? You got to meet Jackie." And I was like, "All right, if you say so."
What kind of coaching work do you do?
I've done a little bit of everything: leadership coaching, personal development. I've even done some relationship coaching. And it took, honestly, about a year and a half from the initial idea of me being introduced to Jackie before we ever spoke. And we didn't actually speak intentionally. We ran into each other on a 4th of July picnic. And finally got a chance to sit down, and she asked me a couple questions. We talked. She's like, "Oh, yeah, we need to talk more."
If you're wondering who Jackie is, she is a professor at Naropa here in Boulder, Colorado, and she runs a therapy practice out of Wild Song Ranch, shout out, and she does equine therapy out there.
Exactly, right. And so I went out and sat with her for a day out at the barn and kind of reviewed my life history with her in horses and healing work. And she was like, "Yeah, we need to do something. We need to figure out how to do something together." And I was like, "Oh, that sounds amazing. That's great." And then one thing led to another, and I never heard from Jackie. And similar experience. Yeah. And then she actually had an accident and got kicked by a horse and had a severe fracture in her arm that needed surgery. And then I felt like, oh, I guess this is kind of just rolling off a cliff, and that was that. And then I got an email from her introducing me to you and another gentleman whose name is escaping me now. Was it Jordan?
I think so.
Maybe Jordan.
It started with a J.
And
Jacob Heimerschmidt.
That was not him. And she was like, you guys need to meet. You seem really aligned. And I was like, what is this thing? Like, what is showing up here now? And I don't remember. I don't remember who reached out first in that email, but I know I responded back saying, like, "Hey, guys, what's up? Should we chat? Like, Jackie thinks we should talk." And you responded. I forget, we talked on the phone maybe, and then decided we should meet.
Yeah, I think we Zoomed.
Was it a Zoom call? Yeah, but that could be right. That could be right. Right.
Yeah.
Then we decided we should meet for coffee. And this is early this year, 2024, in probably mid to late spring. And because of my schedule and availability, unfortunately, my time only allowed for us to meet every other week. And so we were meeting Saturday mornings for coffee and sitting and just sharing who we are with each other, learning about each other. And we got to this point where we were going to brainstorm some brilliant idea about how to create and hold this transformative workshop. We got all jazzed about it, and we sort
Not
of...
a cult.
Not a cult, no. And we kind of did some visioning around it and scratched some ideas down. And I don't know, we were in that. And I remember one day you shared you had done a podcast and you thought, maybe we should do a podcast. And I was like, a podcast? That was never on my radar. But as we talked about that, I felt, you can share your own experience, but I felt an energy that sort of rose up in me around this idea of something that was actually pretty scary to me. Like the idea of me sitting here, in my judgment, I don't know how everybody else would perceive it, but in my judgment, blabbing into a microphone, hoping that I'm saying something interesting enough that people might want to listen to. And here we are, November 9th, and we're recording this conversation after multiple conversations that we've had with each other. And afterwards, we're like, wow, we should have recorded that. That's my version.
So simultaneous to Ian communicating with Jackie, I was a ranch hand at Wild Song, and I was just huffing hay everywhere for the horses. And Jackie had me, I used to work as a recovery coach, and I've studied integrated health and wellness coaching. I also went to rehab when I was 26 for alcohol abuse. So I have a lot of experience with addiction and what it does to the self and to the family unit and to relationships, and it ain't pretty.
Yeah.
And it's super prolific in our society. I, at one point, thought that I would never get out of the depression that I was in, and the world seemed hopeless, and everything tasted like ash, and you know exactly how it feels. Everything was just numb and gray and dark.
Yeah.
And I didn't think I was going to get out of that place, but I had people that were there for me when I least expected them to be, and I ended up studying and learning enough that I was able to climb out of that place and actually find joy again in life. And I was working at Wild Song, I had left a corporate management job, and it just felt really good to be out in nature with the animals. And Jackie was having me work with one of her clients. He was a kid that was struggling with depression, and I took him under my wing, and I had this idea about starting some kind of group, some kind of men's group or co-eds group, you know, where people could come and just talk about things that are really difficult to talk about. You know, there's so many places you can go. You can talk to a therapist, you can talk to your friends, you know, but a lot of people it doesn't feel very accessible sometimes to have a place you can go and talk about the stuff that hurts, where you're not going to face judgment, you know, you're not going to face pre-expectations. And I wanted to create that for people. And Jackie wanted me to operate under her license and create one at the ranch. And then life happened, and she all of a sudden couldn't, but she put me on an email list with this dude, Ian. And we're like, what's up? Let's just communicate directly now. And yeah, it just something about it stuck, and I resisted it quite a bit. I thought, what am I doing? This is crazy. Why don't I spend my time on other things? But every time we met, I just felt this quiet, strong draw to the possibility of creating something. And fast forward to now, here we are.
I know. I love that. And I love that we're still not even sure what we're creating.
No, I sort of feel swept off my feet by destiny. And that feels really good, because just about the time in life, it's happened over and over where I think I know what's going on and I start to get down from it. Something happens in my life and it flips it on its head, and it goes, oh my gosh, I'm only so much in charge.
Right.
And life has a total mind of its own. And I feel really grateful that I've gotten to a place in life where, you know, there was one point where it really scared me. I dipped into a mindset where I thought, is this just like my life? Am I some kind of failure? Am I You know,
Yeah.
am I bound to this life of just hardship? And
Right.
I remember my body like recoiled from that thought, and I thought if I went down that path mentally and emotionally, I don't know if I'd ever be able to come back. So I said, even though life gets really difficult, you know, with everything we have going on personally with our society, we can still choose something other than suffering.
Right.
You know, there's chronic illness, there's trauma. Everybody goes through these things, and I'm not trying to make light of anyone's experience, but we're never truly, truly, truly helpless. I believe that, even if it seems like we are.
Exactly. And I mean, I know personally I've gone through many phases in my life where I've been there, felt that, been down. And I think in our conversations, that's kind of one of the ideals we have around recording these conversations of ours is it's not really to normalize in a sense to make it like not a big deal, but to make it more real, that just average you, an average guy, me, an average guy, lots of other average people. Like,
Wait, if I'm an average guy, what are you?
well, let's not go there. You already know the answer to that. But you know, just maybe even if just one other person hears a conversation of ours and identifies with, resonates with it, and it recognizes like, oh yeah, maybe I'm not really any worse off than these guys, or maybe others around me, and they can start to look differently at their world, their surroundings, the people they're in relationship with. Hopefully they come away with just the glimmer even of a possibility of something different or new.
A glimmer. Yep. Just for full transparency's sake, we're two white dudes talking about our feelings on air. And if you can't handle that, then Godspeed.
Yeah.
But if you're into that, then here we are.
Right. And on top of just being two white dudes, we're two white dudes with no formal education in healing or spirituality or any kind of grand title or initials after our names. We're just sharing our own experiences.
Yeah, a lot of experience.
The things we've come across in our lives. It's been helpful to each of us or to others that we've seen it be helpful to. And a desire to share it all.
Yeah. Our show is called What the Bleep Are We Talking About with Ian and Ryan. And we've talked about exploring different ways throughout history that people have ceremoniously let go, different ways people regulate emotions, different healing techniques, modern and old, different stories of triumph over personal darkness, basically everything we can think of to help people feel a sense of hope again, to feel their hearts again, and ideally to bring joy back into our life. This life is really short. Now, I've lost a lot of people, and one thing that's taught me is that it's really important to be grateful for whatever we can, even if life is a total shambles. I think it's still really important to find something we're grateful for.
I think that's so significant and maybe even right on point in these particular times, because I think there's a large group of people in our country that are struggling right now for any number of reasons. And, you know, as Ryan named at the beginning, like, we're not even a week after the election. And I imagine that there are a group of people who are feeling maybe pretty down because it didn't go the way they wanted it to go.
Yeah. I believe that we're still capable as a people of changing the ways we want. we the people, right? We're the country, you know, and we can still take responsibility for healing ourselves, healing our communities, loving what we have, and sharing it.
Yeah.
I believe that, you know, and it's time for a revolution, and that revolution doesn't need to be violent. It can happen in our hearts.
I love that.
I want to be a part of that. I want to challenge the status quo, because society does a really good job of telling people that they're not enough, that they're not smart enough, that they're not strong enough, that they don't have enough. And I don't believe that.
Yeah, I hear you wholeheartedly there. I mean, that is exactly what I want happening in my own heart.
Yeah.
And in all the hearts of the people that surround me. For myself, for my son, and the ways in which I know that ripples out into the world, it's gonna make a difference everywhere.
You know, I studied sustainability in college, and the question was, how do we save the world? And everybody, you know, myself included, my mind went directly towards what is the answer for the whole world? And there isn't an answer for the whole world. There isn't one answer for everyone. But if we want to see some kind of change in ourselves and outward, I know it sounds like a platitude, but we do have to be that change. We can do it for ourselves, and it has greater ripple effects than we think. You know, it doesn't need to sweep across the nation, you know, like a T Swift album. Shout out to T Swift.
Although it'd be nice if it did.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a pretty high expectation.
We can do things on a small local level, like in our body, in our mind, in our hearts, and have it radiate out. And that wouldn't be a wasted life. That wouldn't be wasted time.
Absolutely. I think that was one of the big energizing aspects to the vision that we sort of dropped into around this podcast. And how, it's funny, like I'm thinking about, we kind of shared these ideas of what we felt like our mission was. Maybe now is a good time to share that.
Yeah.
Because it feels like we're touching into that even in this conversation. Like, why are we here? What are we doing this for? So I've written something, and I'm going to read that, which sort of captures for me what I'm hoping this experience is for myself and for however many fortunate people get to listen to this as well. So for me,
fortunate listeners,
this podcast is creating an opportunity for you and I to be able to share from our cumulative life experience and wisdom that we've gained through the various opportunities we've created for ourselves to learn and grow. And through that sharing, to be able to hopefully impart some of the wisdom that we've gained for ourselves to others. And if that's happening, what we both said we'd ideally love to have as an output from the experience of us doing these recordings and creating this podcast is that we actually help to minimize suffering for people, and even in the smallest of incremental ways. If we do that, I think we can both agree that it's a success, even if it's maybe just one person. I think that's a great target to see if we can do that for one person. And if we do that, then maybe we can do it for two, and it can grow like that organically.
I also wrote a mission statement, and thank you, by the way.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I really love that. I struggled with, like, what do I say on a podcast to reach the masses and create a tidal wave of change in people's hearts? But really, what I realize is whatever I preach, the most powerful thing I could do is go through it myself. Yeah. So Ian and I are here to not only talk about things, but challenge each other to grow through what we resist and what we hold on to.
Totally.
And what we believe to be so true. Because a lot of suffering for me has come from being rigid in my beliefs.
I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you because that resonates so deeply for me.
It sounds so simple to say, but that stuff is scary.
Oh God, yeah.
You know,
rigidity and perfectionism are like. Sometimes I feel like if you look them up in the dictionary, you see my picture.
Yeah. If you look up ham, you'll see a picture of me.
Oh, nice.
So my mission statement is to start a revolution in people's hearts, decoupling them from the victim mindset and helping people wake up to the fact that they are responsible for their worldview and that what we take from life is up to us. I'm here to foster vulnerable, constructive discourse, challenge societal norms, and to try to help people take back control of their lives and gain emotional sovereignty.
Yeah, that feels so huge, so big, and so important.
I think one thing, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and it sort of really resonates with what I shared in my mission, like, and can we do that for just one person?
Mm-hmm. Can we do that for ourselves?
Right.
You know?
Well, I know you, so I know that you have been trying, you've been doing that, you've been working towards that. I know I have. And I know that that's part of what we hope to share here is for others to hear about what these two average white guys have been doing.
Who are you calling out?
You started it. to try to make our lives different. I'm hesitant to say better, but different in a way that's enriching or fulfilling for us.
And I love that. The different. It's so ingrained in our. I know I've experienced it. I want a quick fix. I want something that just makes everything go away, or something that makes everything feel better. And I've gotten caught in this if-then mindset of, well, if I get this, then I'll have that. If I get this job, then I'll be worth something. If I get this girl's number, then I'll be worth something.
Right.
We're worth something just because, and I love that idea of being different, because even if we're able to shift slightly and start breaking up those cobwebs that wrap around our souls, that's progress.
Totally.
To change our mind is one of the greatest superpowers that we have. Ideas are one of the most powerful currencies in existence. If we believe, and belief too, if we believe that something's possible, it is. But if we don't believe that something's possible, it never will be. We'll continuously make it impossible.
Well, and then for me, there's also a gray area in between, which is where I tend to live a lot of my time, which is like, I realized I had a belief of something being a certain way, and it's not necessarily serving me. And then there's this concept of just believing it being the way I want it to be, but sometimes that's feels like too big of a leap. And finding some place in the middle where it's like, well, maybe something could be different. Maybe something could change. And it not necessarily is coming from a place of knowing that it's going to be a certain way, but it's creating space that maybe doesn't exist prior to that mindset.
Yeah. So one of the ideas we talked about for fostering a safe space is by taking the lead on being really vulnerable. I know that word sounds very different to different people. I personally have found that one of the things that made me really emotionally sick was suppressing everything that I was feeling, because I thought I was supposed to be feeling something else. I thought I was supposed to be this big, strong man and just not feel anything.
You're not?
I'm kind of strong.
Yeah.
I'm kind of strong. I'm pretty big, but oh, thanks. I got sidetracked by
you being a big, strong man and having that image.
I broke because of that.
Right.
When I was younger, before I went to rehab, I broke because I was working really hard. I was holding my relationship up, I went from a chronic people pleaser from my childhood to the rescuer or savior, in relationships. And I just bled myself dry
Yeah.
because I was terrified of losing people's affection, losing people's respect. So I would do whatever it took to get that. And what I realized was I had no idea who I was because I was constantly being who I thought everyone wanted me to be.
Yeah.
I lived a lot of my life that way.
Such a huge sacrifice that we aren't even capable of seeing.
Yeah. One question that I really loved that someone asked me was, whose life are you living?
Mm-hmm. I imagine that could be hard to answer at first.
Yeah. That's weird. I realized I had no idea, but it wasn't mine.
Right.
I didn't know what I liked, I felt really empty inside.
Yeah.
And it was really scary to start speaking up for myself.
Speaking of that concept of vulnerability, and we had also talked about maybe helping people to get a little greater sense of who we are and how we've come to think maybe sharing our lives may have some value to others.
Yeah. I want to share the moment that gave me one of my whys.
Yeah.
It was a moment that really changed me, and I would love to share that today.
I'd love to hear it. I'm hoping there's others that would as well.
Yeah. But will you go first?
No. You're up.
All right. So I'm just going to share a story of the first time in my life that I genuinely felt fear.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was 26, I bought a one-way ticket to Hawaii, and I flew out there to try and start a life. And I did it. Within 5 days, I didn't know anyone. I had no jobs lined up, but in 5 days, just going door to door out there, I had a full-time job and a home. I did it. And my dad was a huge part of my support. And I remember having a conversation with him on the phone, and I said, Dad, I made it. I have a life out here. I can live here now. I did it. And he said, I'm proud of you, son, and I love you. And that was the last time I ever talked to him.
Oh.
A couple days after that conversation, I got a phone call from his jewelry store, and he didn't show up for work. He had died in the night, and it messed me up.
Yeah.
I felt super alone. I felt super guilty for being out in Hawaii, away from everyone when it happened. I remember the sound my sister made when I told her. And I came home to settle his estate, and it was scary. I leaned on the bottle really hard at that time. I was drinking really heavily, and this had kind of progressed in my life slowly over time, where I didn't know how to regulate my emotions. I didn't know how to process my emotions. I was used to suppressing emotions. I was used to just muscling through. And I know a lot of, especially men, are.
Yeah.
This society condemns openness and genuineness. It's safer to keep your head down, and it can be really difficult to talk about the stuff that hurts. And I was right there. I was bottled up, and I couldn't get anything out. So what helped me sleep at night was drinking myself to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And I went back out to Hawaii and worked on a boat for the better part of a year, but I ultimately came home, and I was in a relationship that ended, and between the breakup and my dad dying, and just exhaustion with work and drinking all the time, I lost control, and I went on a bender, and I ended up missing work, and I checked myself into rehab.
In Hawaii?
No, this was back here in Colorado.
Oh, this was already back here.
Yeah. And rehab really opened my eyes. I had no idea that there are entire schools of thought and training and technique and study around our ability to regulate, our navigating triggers, navigating addictions, why we're addicted to things, what makes us want to escape, where our anxiety comes from. I learned more in rehab than I ever did outside of it. Outside of that space, it was like, oh, we'll just deal with it. Grow up.
Right.
On a time
Man
effort,
up.
just man up.
Yep.
And I didn't know exactly how. I didn't know what that meant, but rehab really helped me understand more about myself and what was going on. And that was the first time in my life I experienced not being condemned for what I had done and been through, Nobody knew that I was struggling. I knew.
Yeah.
I didn't know how bad of a problem I had until I broke, and ended up checking myself in. And I remember in rehab, they said, well, you can never drink again. You can't do it. You can't hack it.
Right.
You have to live the rest of your life. And it sort of felt like they were saying you need to be afraid of that.
Afraid of alcohol?
Afraid of yourself.
Oh.
So you have to control yourself, and that's the way it is for the rest of your life. And something about that didn't quite sit right, to be honest with me. I thought, I don't want to be broken. Mm-hmm. I want to live a life of balance. I want to figure out what that means. So it was hard for me to just take all these doctors and everybody's word for it that I was just this, I felt lesser. And that's a lot of people struggling with addiction do. We get condemned and put into a category, and then it can be really difficult to exist outside of that box that people, and we put ourselves in. Mm-hmm. Well, I was really grateful for my experience in rehab, and I got out of rehab, felt like a new person. I felt really grateful just to be out of that space, in detox. Like, there were no doors on the bathroom, so you couldn't hurt yourself. But to me, it felt like jail.
Yeah.
And so I was just grateful to be out again, where I could go to the store if I wanted to, but I was still unsure of who I was and what was really going on, and if I really had a problem or if I just needed to learn more about my emotions. And I started working full time. I had my own apartment, and lo and behold, I started drinking again. Mm-hmm. I challenged that idea that I could never do it again, and I wanted to see for myself if I could and control it. Mm-hmm. Well, I didn't do a very good job. And It was the middle of February. I left work on a Friday night, and I went home and drank. Saturday, I woke up and went to the liquor store, and I went and bought more alcohol, and I drank. Mm-hmm. By Sunday morning, I felt like total garbage. Went to the liquor store, bought more alcohol, and drank. Mm-hmm. And Monday morning, I was driving to work. I couldn't stomach food because I was just a mess inside. My gut was all messed up. And so I remember having an energy drink and a fistful of Advil on the way to work. And I had forgotten that day the superintendent on my job site wasn't going to be there, so I was responsible for opening the site, and I was the last one there. And all of our subs were waiting. They were all looking at me, waiting for me to open the trailer so that they could get their stuff and begin the day. Mm-hmm. Well, all the locks were frozen. It's like the middle of February. And there was ice, and I just remember trying to get into the trailer when I felt like I was going to vomit. Mm. And I turned around, and I saw the porta potty, and I quickly walked over to it, and I was really kind of gagging at that point. Like, I was just really trying not to vomit, but the lock was frozen. So there I was, just desperately trying to knock the ice off and heat it up with a lighter. And I finally, at the last minute, got into the porta potty. And I remember looking at the urinal, little thing on the wall, and I threw up. And it was a lot, but it wasn't bile or anything. It was blood. I threw up a ton of blood. And that urinal receptacle filled up with blood. So I opened the seat, And I remember ending up on my hands and knees, throwing up blood. And in that moment, I was looking at a gigantic pile of frozen human shit
Yep.
that was steaming with my blood all over it. And I thought, this is what I've become.
Wow.
And I felt fear. In that moment, I remember no longer knowing if I was actually going to make it.
Yeah.
If I was ever going to be able to have a family, if I was ever going to be able to get married. I just thought, maybe I'm next. And I remember wiping the blood off my chin and leaving the porta potty, and nobody knew what had happened. I went over to the trailer and got everybody going, and I threw up blood 3 or 4 more times that day. And I ended up going home, and I went to class that night, and I became anemic. I needed iron after that.
Yeah, sure.
And that was my moment. That was my moment that I thought, I have a choice now. And if I don't change something, then I'm probably going to die. And it wasn't rehab. It wasn't my friends and families saying, we're worried about you. You need to stop. You need to change. It wasn't the doctors presenting all this research to me about, what alcohol does to the brain and the centers that allow us to feel hope. And it affects the center of our brain that allows us to believe. And when that center shuts down, when we can't believe in something, that's when true helplessness sets in. I was there.
Yeah.
But it was that moment, watching my blood flow into that frozen porta potty,
Yep.
that woke me up.
Wow.
So that was when I genuinely started seeking help.
Do you go back to rehab?
No, I've never been back to rehab, actually. I was able to stay out, and I experimented with alcohol after that, but it was never the same. And I'm really grateful to say that I started practicing other techniques for decompressing from stress. I was desperate at that point. Like, I literally tried everything.
Right.
I was like, I am running from the demon that is myself, But what I've learned is that, yeah, I had demons in me, but they were parts of me that were really hurt. And what they were lacking was me consciously working to protect them, consciously working to accept them, the parts of myself that were broken. I had condemned them. I had condemned myself.
Right.
I had made myself lesser. But after that, I started my journey of learning to accept myself exactly the way I was. And it was probably the best thing that ever happened.
Right. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. You said a lot of different things in there, and you named many things that you said were valuable to you. And I'm curious if there's like one main takeaway for you.
This is retrospect. It didn't feel like this going through it.
Of course, yeah.
But looking back on it, it was never as hopeless as I thought it was. It was never as impossible as I thought it was. And it's so much easier to see into someone else's life than it is to face our own. But looking back at my own life, I always had what it took. I just didn't know it. Accepting myself the way I was the key to actually starting to grow the way I needed to have a healthy, functioning life.
Beautiful. Yeah. Well, I'm personally glad that you made your way through all those experiences along that path, and
I want
you're
to
sharing it with me.
thank you. And I want to thank everyone that was there for me. I want to thank my mom. I want to thank my sister. I want to thank my brother. I want to thank all the people that came out of the woodworks and just, another thing that I took away from it was no matter how small you think something might be, like calling someone and just saying, hey, I was thinking about you.
Right.
It might seem inconsequential, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah. Yeah, what a lesson, huh?
So I want to do that for people now. That's why I'm here. It's my turn. I want to share my story. I want to share what I've learned. I want to be here. And I want to help as many people as I can, because there's a lot of people out there that are suffering and they feel alone. And I know what that feels like. And it's really hard.
It is. It is so hard. And thank you so much for your honesty and vulnerability. And I'm feeling your huge heart in this moment. And if you're just listening, you're not able to see this, but I'm a
mess.
Witnessing the tears running down your face. And it brings me closer to you. That vulnerability really, it opens my heart just as much as I'm feeling your heart opening and sharing. And I'm really grateful for that. Thank you.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah. So I guess that makes it my turn.
Yep.
So my story starts, about 15 years ago. And my evolutionary journey is really obviously been my whole life. And I thought I was in it, my parents divorced when I was 12 and been in and out of therapy and suffered with depression and gone through some pretty severe depressive episodes. And I really thought I'm managing. Started meditating actually. And in a meditation group that this therapist that I was seeing had been highly encouraging me to go to, I had started going a couple times, and one night I'm there and this woman walks in that I'd never seen before. And we sit next to each other and we start up a conversation, and truth be told, I actually went home with her that night. And that was the beginning of a relationship with this woman that was very intense, very intense. And she was very insightful in a lot of ways, and also really challenging for me. She had a son who was about 7 at the time, and witnessing her mother, the way she was mothering this boy was challenging to me. And I noticed as this relationship progressed, I just sort of felt like I was disappearing more and more. And it got to a point where she ended the relationship with me and said a lot of things that were really painful to hear about how she experienced me. So much so, like she said something along the lines of how, she didn't feel like, I was showing up like as a man anymore, and she didn't want me around her son. And then she says to me, "You should be in a men's group." And I'm like, "What's that? What's a men's group?" And she's like, "Well, I'll connect you with somebody." And she sent me an email, and in that email was a reference to this guy who was, I think at the time, if I remember, he was starting a group. I was like, I was in an immense amount of pain, just feeling like I'd lost everything of who I was. Like I didn't really exist anymore, and I was devastated in the fact that this woman who, to be honest, in this point, like I don't even know how in love I was with her, but it was the loss, it was the abandonment, it was the confrontation of how she perceived me, and how, in my judgment, like how distasteful it was. It even sounded so distasteful to me to hear about me from this other person.
I don't think it's ever tastes good to look in the mirror, unless we're lucky.
Right.
We can but you have to look in the mirror and love what you see. You
Totally.
have to.
So then I followed the direction. I met this guy, and his first men's group he'd ever started. There was just 3 guys in it, me and 2 other guys. And he'd based the men's group on this book called No More Mr. Nice Guy. Mm-hmm. And it's a book for men written by a doctor, and it essentially is looking at like codependency for men, how it shows up, what it comes from, and how to start to like push against that. And in that group, we were kind of working through the book, and he had brought in this other book written by David Deida called The Way of the Superior Man.
Oh, I've heard of that.
And if you don't know the book, it in essence, it just really is exploring what polarity is between the masculine and the feminine, and what it looks like when polarity is aligned and how it works, or when it's out of alignment and how essentially dysfunctional it becomes. And I was reading this book and was like, I felt like she quoted this book to me when she ended the relationship. It was just like, holy cow, like this is like a knife through my heart. Like every paragraph or every chapter was like, oh God, that was me. That was me. Obviously when he's talking about the dysfunctional parts. And the way that life is and how it really does present opportunities in the weirdest of ways. I'd mentioned a little earlier, I'm a firefighter. I was working a night shift because we had a big fire, and I was running an engine, and my job was to have this engine every 2 hours drive around for a little bit so that the neighborhood knew we were there, and otherwise we were sitting at the station, and that was for the whole night. So I'm reading The Way of the Superior Man, and this guy on the engine, who I knew, but I didn't really, we met, I maybe knew his name, but that was as much. And he's walking around and sees that I'm reading the book, and he comes over to me and he's like, what do you think of that book? And I'm like, and you have to realize, like, I am like devastated. Like, I am so torn apart and raw and like in such a state of pain, like just so much pain. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm in this men's group. The guy wants us to read it. I'm reading the book, and it feels like this relationship that just ended. The woman quoted the book to me when she ended our relationship. It was just like horrible. It just was devastating. And he's like, really? Interesting. I might have something to share with you. Would you be open to it? And I was like, fuck yeah. Like, I don't care what it is at this point. I'll do anything. I'm in so much pain. And like a week or two later, he emails me, invites me to an event, which I go to. And it's put on by an international men's group called the Mankind Project. And it talks about the stages of life that men go through, and how we do it. We go at it alone, and we get knocked down, and we get up, and we get knocked down, and we get up, and we get knocked down, and after enough times, we don't really maybe want to get up.
Yeah.
And in this living experience that I'm watching, that they're modeling for me, they show somebody reaching out a hand to the person that's been knocked down so many times. And it was just like, it hit me like, I don't have anything like that. I've never had anything like that in my life. I've felt alone my whole life. And what it was really what they refer to as an enrollment event, to go through their initiation. And I had no money at the time, and I'm like, I think I want to do this, but I can't afford it. And they're like, well, we'll make it work. Like we have funds for people to make sure that money's not an issue. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And they're like, no, like, how much can you pay? And we negotiated this, and I paid almost nothing to go.
That's cool.
And I went through this weekend, which was really, we never talked about profanity in this and how we feel about using it. And I'm realizing, like, I really want to say some words.
If we curse, then Longmont Public Media won't
Oh, that's
broadcast
right.
our material until after 10 p.m.
That's right. That's right.
But I have a potty mouth.
Yeah.
I really do. If you
So-
know me, sorry, Mom.
All right.
Sorry, Audrey.
So here we go. That's enough for me.
Wait a minute.
What?
What did you want to say?
No. That's enough for me to know that what I'm going to
okay.
say.
Yeah. We can just upload to
yeah.
our YouTube channel and
There we go. So
drop a few
it was
F-bombs 'cause
fucking.
it feels good.
it was fucking brutal. To have all these men standing around me and the group of guys that were going through this, challenging us and calling us out and pointing out all these things about who we are and how we are and the way we were living our lives and how is that costing us and just the whole thing, you know, being exposed to aspects of emotional intelligence and learning how numb I am.
Ooh.
You know, I've survived. I had survived my life by being numb.
Yeah.
And not allowing myself to feel because what I had to feel was really painful.
Yeah.
And I made it through that, and it was definitely transformative, but I can't say that I came away altered in the way that I really wanted to be. And what it afforded me was this opportunity to start sitting in a men's group that's particularly a group that is associated with the Mankind Project. And there's a format that they use, and these guys that have everybody's done this, had the same experience I just had. And you just sit in a group of men that are like asking for you to be authentic and vulnerable, and then are going to challenge you on whether or not you're keeping your agreements, and are you in integrity, and what's working in your life, and then what's not working in your life, and what do you want to do about it? How do you want to take a look at what's not working? And granted, I've done therapy. I've done lots of therapy. And there's nothing like sitting in a group of men that I don't really know, but in a way are loving me when I don't even feel like I can love myself. And that happened in 2011. April 2011 was when I did my weekend. And the exposure that I've gotten over the years with that, my involvement with it, my experiences of witnessing countless other men in group or going through these trainings, and how they come in and the way they leave and the transformation that's possible. There's something about it that has shown me, like, I'm not any more broken than anyone else. But even more importantly, which is really hard to say a lot of times, is that I actually have something of value to share. And that evolution is really hard. It's been really hard for me, and I struggle with it. My life has not been easy. And it's hard even for me to imagine that in a little over a month and a half, I'm going to turn 60. When I look back, I feel in a lot of ways I don't have a lot to show for the 60 years. And that comes from my judgments of how I grew up and where I grew up, and probably a whole mess of other stuff too that's not ideal. But I'm starting to really get the sense that who I am and how I am and what I really have to offer matters. And I don't know how else to be except to do what I can and seek out the ways to show up and offer that.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah,
You've had an impact on me.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you for all your years as a firefighter.
Oh, You're welcome, and that's hard also to receive thanks because I don't do it for thanks. I do it because it feels important.
Yeah.
It feels necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing better for me than the feeling of doing something that makes a difference in somebody else's life.
Yeah. I think one of the most powerful things we can experience as people, and everyone deserves the opportunity to feel it, is a sense of purpose.
Right. And it's crazy that when I think about this story that I just shared, like all of this, and there's more that I haven't even shared about where my journey has taken me over the last 15 years, but it all happened because I was destroyed by this woman. And
not completely.
Well, it was stimulated. Like you know what I mean? Like that was the catalyst.
Yeah.
For me to start to seek.
Your undoing.
Yeah, exactly. to seek the undoing of me.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's hard. It's hard to look in the mirror.
Oh my God.
It is.
I will say that with good support and experience, it gets a little bit easier.
Yeah.
But it still takes effort for sure.
Emotional strength is like physical strength. You don't go to the gym on day one and do a push-up and then get jacked.
For sure. For sure.
The first time I ever did a push-up, I thought I was dying. I hated it. I thought, I can never do this again. I'm dying.
Yeah.
But if you work on it consistently, if you practice gratitude consistently, if you practice challenging your triggers consistently, it does get easier.
Yeah.
It really does.
And if you stop practicing, you lose it.
That's true. It's easy to slip.
Yeah.
It's easy to slip. It's easy to get covered up in gunk. It's easy to carry things around and just feel tired in our souls.
Mm-hmm.
So we are nearing the end of our first episode, and one thing we talked about after sharing some vulnerability, we wanted to talk about what we're grateful for and what we took away from this episode, because we both agree that we think it's really important to practice framing our outlook in a way that is empowering. Mm-hmm. Choosing the most empowering reason for the events in our life, as to not slip into a dark victim place. So, what are you grateful for?
Most grateful for my son.
Yeah. What's his name?
Colson.
Yeah. Shout out.
I never wanted to be a father. I never felt that I had been shown or had a concept of what it meant to be a father, or in a healthy way. Mm-hmm. And he's been such a teacher.
Yeah.
And I've learned so much about myself and what I'm really capable of.
Yeah. It feels too, just kind of watching you over the last few months, is that you're at the beginning of the journey.
Oh, he's only 5.5.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
For sure.
Well, thank you. I'm really grateful that we're here. I'm really grateful that we stuck with it as long as we did in order to get here. I'm really grateful for my family. Really grateful for my mom. I'm really, really grateful for the love of my life, Audrey Grace, and her support. I'm really grateful for my little sister, Nikolai Rose Boley. Grateful for my brother. I'm grateful for my job. I'm grateful that I have all 4 limbs. I'm grateful that I can feel. Because there's been times in my life when I couldn't feel anything. And even though things hurt, I'm grateful I can feel.
Yeah, I feel that totally. And listening to your gratitude, I'm realizing that I'm really grateful for you. Like, the truth is, I would never do something like this ever in a million years. Would I ever? I could, if somebody asked if they could see me doing a podcast, I would have laughed. I would have flat out laughed.
I remember when we first started talking about podcasts, and you were like, "I'm angry. Like, those people have it so good." And
Right.
it's like, well,
And
we just maybe let's try.
You just, I don't know. You created a space that was filled with possibility, and I felt inspired enough to be like, oh, I'm gonna push against all the discomfort and all the stories about not good enough, or like we talked about earlier about rigidity and perfectionism and all that stuff. It's just really intense for me, and you've somehow made that not be so big. And I'm noticing other places in my life that I'm seeing that show up as well.
That's really cool.
And yeah, so I'm just super grateful.
Thank you
for that. Thank you.
So on our next episode, Ian and I would like to open a dialogue about generational trauma and how that's affected us in our lives and how we see it play out in other people's lives. And maybe there's something we can do about not identifying with everything that we grew up with.
Or at least not making it wrong or bad. It just is.
Yeah.
And possibly starting to create a space for a shift in how we relate to it.
Ooh, well said.
Yeah. Because I think that's, my judgment is that's really the biggest difficulty with generational trauma. The truth is it's probably never going to go away.
Yeah.
My desperate hope is that it is lessened over time, but it's ultimately how we relate to it.
Yeah.
And what meanings we make about it and the stories that run in our heads around it. And my hope is that for you and I to talk about it a little bit, our personal experiences around it, what we've seen, and maybe to help just that one other person have a different experience of theirs.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you for listening to today's episode. Thank you for being you. And give yourself some slack.
Yeah.
Give yourself some slack.
Yeah. Thanks for all of you. Until next time.